News Radio 710 Keel is your news and weather station.
So we look up and how lucky are we?
Lo and behold.
That just explain to us how you ended up. You just came by to visit, which, by the way, you are always welcome to do. Former Mayor Cedric Glover is here.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, guys.
You look great. You look fabulous.
Well, thank you so much.
What's up these days? You're relaxing, laying low.
Honeydews.
8 years of honeydews.
Well, 11.
Oh, my
Yeah.
11 and a half, actually.
Well, yeah,
Wow.
that's true, too.
But yes, a very intense 8-year worth of honeydews.
There's a bunch of little innocuous questions. What are you up to these days? Do you miss the fray? All of those things. But that doesn't really matter compared to the, dare I say, hubbub that, is it fair to say, you kind of started on your? Well, you tell me what's. I mean, you look at your Facebook
We're
page.
talking about Elio, General Motors, and Land Rover. And you can connect the dots for us, I hope.
Well, let me first of all start by extending my condolences to Mayor Joe Riley and all the folks in Charleston for the tragedy that occurred last night.
Oh, my Lord, yeah. Now, have you met Mayor Riley?
Yes, I know Mayor Riley. Mayor Riley is a friend. Met him back in 2008. In fact, Mayor Riley started a group called the Mayor's Institute on City Design. And for folks here who are excited about what's happening in Shreveport Common, then you would give a good bit of the credit for that to Mayor Riley and the efforts that he started through the U.S. Conference of Mayors. In fact, the first $100,000 grant that we got for SHRAC to come up with the vision plan for not just the Central Arts Station, but the 9-block area around it was funded by a grant that Mayor Riley helped me get through the Mayor's Institute on City Design. So he's a wonderful man.
Like a hell of a mayor, too.
Well, in fact, after I first met him and listened to his initial presentation on the MICD, his work in Charleston, I became extremely depressed because I realized that, this is someone who has done just a wonderful body of work in conjunction with the folks of Charleston. And I said, I have no chance of even being able to come close to that.
Have you spoken to him, sent him a text, an email?
We've all reached out, but
he's busy.
He's extremely busy.
Right, right.
Okay.
And the thing I realized at the time, and what cheered me up after I got depressed, watching his wonderful presentation on all the great things that he's done in Charleston, was I realized that he'd been mayor of Charleston since I was 8 years old.
Wow.
And so I cheered up a bit because at that point in time I was, looking at close
Basically,
to 40.
they don't term out in Charleston.
Well, they don't have term limits in Charlotte, and he's had a chance to be able to put forth great work that has benefited that city, and he has helped young incoming mayors by being a friend, by being a mentor, and to know that he and his city are going through something that is as horrible as what transpired last night is something that saddens us all, and my prayers to him and the people of Charleston.
Let's get to this GM skirmish, Elio Land Rover.
Absolutely.
Connect the dots. Tell us what's happened.
Well, how far you want to go back?
You start. It's your story.
Well, I mean, this is a situation. My involvement with GM-related issues go back to my time as a legislator, back when you had the expansion and renovations in anticipation of the Hummer. I, along with Arlena Acree, the chamber at that time, we passed legislation because we lost the first automotive supplier to Longview, the company that came in to build the rear ends for the Hummer and that generation of Colorados and Canyons. We did legislation that doubled the tax credit for automotive-related jobs in the state that brought the rest of those supplier jobs here. When I got to the mayor's office, we were obviously hoping that the growth trajectory for GM would continue or at least stabilize. It turns out that it didn't. In fact, I'll never forget, I think it was July 27th, 28th or so of 2008, if I'm not mistaken. I got information relayed to me from one of my folks inside of General Motors that said the plant is going to close. I want to make sure you know that. I said, well, who else knows this? And what I was told at that time, nobody outside of GM. And so my first response at that point was to call Stephen Morey, who was the state's director of economic development to see if he could confirm that information. He had not heard that. Told me, let me make a few calls and I'll get back with you. To shortcut that portion of the story, this is probably about 10 o'clock that day. By the time we got to the evening drive of that same afternoon, both Stephen Moray, Governor Jindal, folks from the parish, and a host of other leaders were all convened on the second floor of Government Plaza in the mayor's conference room to talk about what actually was transpiring at that point. And so that's when we began working on what is it that we do to either first try and convince GM not to go, that this is an operation that can be viable. The initial indications we got were that they were going to keep the Shreveport plant on the open list. The reason as to why I felt optimistic about that, and others did as well, is because GM had just finished investing well over $1 billion into this local plant, this local facility. In fact, even to this day, the Shreveport GM plant represents the second highest investment total into a GM facility over the last decade and a half, second only to the CTS Cadillac plant up in Lansing, Michigan, which is about $2 billion. And so whether it was going to be continuing with the production of the Hummer or some other form of truck, SUV, we felt that we had a good chance. Well, it turns out that did not happen. And then the question became, one, we know we need to save the automotive industry in general. And so I became one of those mayors. We formed a group called the Mayor's Automotive Council, went to D.C., and began to lobby the Congress, support the administration in coming up with the plan to try and ensure that Ford and Chrysler and GM did not completely go under.
All remain viable, yeah.
Exactly. Part of that, for those of us who were advocating from the local level, that realized that we were now going to be, at least some of us, in communities where these plants were shutting down. We wanted to avoid what I refer to, and I don't mean any slight to anybody because I don't know the gentleman or the lady or the group that owns the old AT&T plant, but the thing that came first and foremost to my mind was that I don't want to end up with the GM facility. If it's no longer going to be a part of the GM family, I don't want it to end up like the old AT&T plant. Now, what do I mean by that? You guys were around long enough to know back in the late 60s, 70s, all the way up through the 80s, thousands of folks went to work at AT&T, helped to build the middle class as we know it here in Northwest Louisiana. When those shutdown moves went into place, that plant ended up in the hands of folks that I don't know. They're private folks, and it's not had a significant presence of jobs from that day since.
We have to take a break, but we're going to follow this up because now we have the parish owning the facility, and we have a skirmish.
Well, and we'll tell you how it is that you got to a point to where you can have somebody other than how that ownership process, how that transition process was intended to work.
You can hang out?
Absolutely.
Cool.
And we want to hear about Land Rover. We want to hear about your thoughts on Elio or not Elio and everything. Go ahead.
But before I get you there, I want you, in fact, if you guys want to pull up, so I know you're all technologically connected here, go to the racertrust.org website.
Okay.
That was the organization that was set up by the bankruptcy court in conjunction with the U.S. government to try and facilitate an orderly, effective transition of these former facilities into job and wealth creators within the communities where they're located.
Back again with more with former Mayor Cedric Glover is on the way.